千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Let's get started with Tao Te Ching, Chapter 10. The title of this chapter is Mystic Virtue, a straightforward translation from the original 3 characters that you see right below. The first character, Xuan, is mystic. Second character, the one in the middle, De, is virtue. Same character as the middle character of Tao Te Ching. The third and last character to the right is simply the character for chapter. As the title implies, this entire chapter focuses on the concept of the mystic virtue. Mystic, in this case, points to the profound nature of the virtue to create without being possessive, to act without getting tangled up in attachments, to rule without being domineering. It is also a reference to the mystical power of being virtuous. The power is such that to those who have not encountered the Tao, it may seem miraculous or magical. To those who do understand, it is about what is natural. It is about the power of acting from one's nature. So this chapter is a guide for internal and external cultivation. Or better yet, we can say that it's about inward-directed practice and outward-directed practice. It is a word of encouragement from Lao Tzu to all of us to stay on the path. It is also an encouraging opportunity for us to advance the state of our spirituality from where it is at currently to where it can be in the future. Let us take a look at the chapter together. This chapter is significantly longer than the previous ones that we have seen, and we have 17 lines in all. Tao Te Ching 10. In holding the soul and embracing oneness, can one be steadfast without straying? In concentrating the energy and reaching relaxation, can one be like an infant? In cleaning away the worldly view, can one be without imperfections? In loving the people and ruling the nation, can one be without manipulation? In the heavenly gates opening and closing, can one hold to the feminine principle? In understanding clearly all directions, can one be without intellectuality? bearing it, rearing it, bearing without possession, achieving without arrogance, raising without domination. This is called the mystic virtue. So we begin with a description about a whole bunch of questions that Lao Tzu is asking. 6 questions in all. These are questions for self-examination, and they point toward the, as I mentioned, the inward-directed cultivational practice as well as outward-directed. So the first task that we have now is to look for the repeating characters that will give us a clue as to the hidden structure of this chapter. So comparing the characters from one line to the next, we see definitely there are characters that repeat themselves. Let me highlight them for you in this slide. As you can see, we can definitely detect repeating patterns in the even number lines 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. The first character and the last character are the same. So in the translation to the right, what do these characters correspond to? Well, the first character is translated as can. It is a character for can or able to. The last character there is not translated as a word. It's a character that acted as a punctuation mark in ancient Chinese. It's one of the several characters used for that purpose. Whenever we see it, it is always translated as the question mark. So when we see a repeating pattern like that, we can say, okay, well, below line 12, there aren't any more repeating patterns like it, and therefore, we can identify from 1 to 12, that's a whole section, 12 lines asking 6 questions. And then from 13 to 17, that'll be the bottom half or the concluding section. Now, as we explore this, I want to talk about the significance of this chapter, chapter 10, and why it is so important for us to talk about it in the way that we're going to. This is one of those chapters that in the study of the Tao Te Ching tends to get glossed over. That's really too bad because it is an important chapter asking important questions. Most of the time, people who translate and interpret the Tao Te Ching will talk about the abstract concepts and they tend to gloss over them. They want to get at the other stuff that has more significant symbolic meaning with visual metaphors and so on. And therefore, as a whole, these lines are understood usually at the surface level. What we're going to do in our talk today is to be different. We're going to delve deeply, as you heard me say at the beginning of this meeting, so that when there's that in-depth and clear understanding of the first 12 lines, your experience with the Tao Te Ching will change. When you look at the commercially available books on the Tao Te Ching and you look at the same chapter, you're going to be able to tell exactly how shallow the understanding is compared to the understanding you will gain today. One thing to realize about the 12 lines is that there's the yin and yang symbol hidden throughout. Now, as we're looking at the translation, you are not going to see yin and yang anywhere in the first 12 lines. But I'm going to give you the sneak preview. The first 6 lines are inward directed. These are cultivational practices that are focused on the self as opposed to the external world. And you can probably imagine the next 6 lines from 7 to 12, that is outward directed. It is focused on one's interactions with the material world. So keep the yin and yang symbol in mind. And also keep in mind that each half of the complementary duality of yin and yang must contain an element of the other. What this means is that inward directed cultivation contains elements applying to the external. In a similar way, outwardly directed cultivation contains elements applying to the internal. This is all going to be very abstract right now, but I promise we will make them real and very clear. Right now, I want to divide up 1 to 12 based on the discussion we just had. And this is a subdivision within the first section, the first subsection being internally or inwardly directed, and the next 6 lines external or outwardly directed. Now let's take a look at the last section there as well. That is lines 13 to 17. They do not have the repeating patterns that you see from 1 to 12, but they have their own repeating characters. If you focus your attention on 13 to 17, specifically on 14 to 16, those 3 lines, it is easy to see that the middle 2 characters are the same. And in all 3 cases, translated the same way, and that is without. So we're going to get to it, but first we need to do a line by line of the first 12 lines. Line 1. In holding the soul and embracing oneness, can one be steadfast without strain? So line 1 about holding the soul and embracing oneness, I want to first focus on the character that's been translated as the soul. It's the one in the middle, po. Now, I want to note that the translation here to soul is approximate. What do I mean by that? Well, in Chinese, there are multiple characters all translated to the soul, and that is, since ancient times, mystical traditions, spiritual traditions have always identified multiple aspects of the soul and given each one a different character. They all get translated to soul, just like it is said the Eskimos have many different words for snow. When translated to English, they all map to snow. In this particular case, po has the additional nuance of vigor and vitality, your life force. So when you speak of someone with a strong or powerful spirit or soul, when you speak of the force of the soul, you're really talking about what in ancient China would be called po. And so when we talk about this in English, we often refer to po as one's spirit or energy. Your spiritual energy can wax and wane, it can be powerful, it can expand, It can be significant in exerting an influence on the events happening around you. So here's the bottom line. Regardless of label, regardless of whatever name we want to pin on this character Paul, we can all agree that possessing that life force, that energy, that is essential to living fully. It's when we talk about living life with zest, living life in a vigorous way, really enjoying the heck out of it. That is what powerful Paul will do for one. So here in this line, it's talking about holding fast to it. Now there is another significant two characters to talk about, and that's the last two characters there. So it's what gets translated at the end of this line as embracing oneness. Oneness in this context is synonymous with the Tao. So to embrace the oneness is to embrace the Tao. And that Tao, remember, is further reflected as the inner core of your being. So embracing the Tao in that context is synonymous with embracing your true self. Now, when we talk about embracing oneness, I also must talk about the different levels of Tao cultivation. Starting with level 1. When you first begin with the Tao, you study it. So level 1 is study the Tao. It's like reading books, reading to talks like this one, or perhaps having read the books and listened to talks like this one, reflect upon the content. Think about how the ideas apply to your life. That's all level 1. Study the Tao. What's beyond that? What's above level 1? It is to emulate the Tao. This goes beyond, what I just read. That is an interesting concept. It goes beyond that. Contemplating the concept. It goes to, how do I become more like the Tao? What does the Tao do exactly? How does it react or behave? What are its characteristics? How can I act and behave in a similar way? That's emulate the Tao. Then the work of emulation leads you to the next level, which is the level of alignment. To be aligned or congruent with the Tao. It is when we say, I am flowing with the Tao, or I am going along in the same direction as the Tao. Typically, that direction is identified as the positive traits for humanity. So the goodness that we see among human beings may be kindness, compassion, maybe mutual assistance, maybe friendship, alliance. These are along the same direction as the flow, as the vector of the Tao, the direction of the Tao. And when you are going in that direction, you definitely feel the congruence in the form of harmony with life, yourself, and the Tao itself. You can feel it. So that's level 3. Now, looking at level 3, we may be thinking, hey, well, that's pretty good. I mean, isn't that the ultimate purpose? Isn't that the reason why we study the Tao? Is so that we can be aligned with it? We can go in the same direction as the Tao? Well, I now bring you to the real ultimate level of the Tao practice, and that is to attain oneness. When you are one with the Tao, it is even greater than I'm traversing along the same direction as the Tao, because there's no distinction or separation between you and the Tao itself. How do we get to that oneness? Well, meditation is a way to do it. That is one potential pathway. And that is something that we start with in this chapter. It is not where we end. It is the starting point. And psychologists in modern times have identified the flow state as another avenue to oneness. The flow state, psychologically, is a possible state to attain with any mental or physical pursuit. And it is something that pretty much everyone has experienced from time to time. When you're in the flow state, one with the Tao, in a literal sense, you are the Tao, and the Tao is you. In that state, your sense of ego or self-consciousness dissolves. Same with your sense of time. It transforms into timelessness. So in that state, an instant can feel like an eternity. Or conversely, hours can pass without conscious awareness. Another way to know that you've been in a state of oneness is that when you come out of it, that is when you realize that while you were in it, there was a profound bliss, a state of bliss associated with it. Something you realize retroactively. Not during the experience. Why not? Because while you are in that state of oneness or unity, the only thing that you experience is the flow, the currents of the Tao. Feelings and emotions are set aside for the purity of the experience. They still exist, but you reflect on them later on, and you know later on that it was presence. I'm trying to describe something that is traditionally very difficult to describe, but must be experienced firsthand. I want to make sure everybody knows that when I talk about bliss, it's a very different kind of bliss that people sometimes will point out. It's an internal bliss. It's not the external appearance of bliss. When you investigate spirituality and Eastern thoughts, you will, for sure, encounter people who project or showcase themselves as spiritual, enlightened, compassionate, pious, or some combination thereof. One way they showcase themselves is to walk around with a blissful expression at all times. I want to provide a note of skepticism to be wary, because such appearance will have delusion as a major component rather than authenticity. One last thing to note is that none of us can be in the state of oneness indefinitely. At some point, we all return from that state back to a normal operating state in the material world. So as you can see, even just talking about oneness, there's a lot to it. Let's continue on and talk about the entire lines. In holding the soul and embracing oneness, let me talk about what this means. I mentioned that meditation is the starting point. to understand this line. It goes on much more than just meditation, but in meditation, when you center yourself, holding the soul, you can rein in fragmented thoughts. Those mental fragments begin to come back in to the mind itself, centering yourself. And the oneness, the idea of the oneness, to embrace it in life, that oneness, I mentioned that is synonymous with the Tao. So embracing oneness is embracing the Tao. When you are constantly embracing the Tao in life, you are keeping it first and foremost in your mind as you walk the path. So this line overall is among the first Tao references about the meditative state. Meditation as an ancient history, much further back in time than even the Tao Te Ching. Ancient sages from a long time ago, 5,000 years ago, knew about this particular method to transition into serenity. They also understood that this oneness had to be applied to everyday life. Because just as we must use mindfulness to go into meditation, we must also use mindfulness in living life. That is, when we approach life itself with present moment awareness, when we use the observation in the Tao context to observe in a detached way, to perceive and observe external events, as well as our internal thoughts, that puts us on the path and keeps us there. So we may start this chapter with the idea of turning attention inward to go into meditation, to observe and manage your inner self, letting everything settle. The concepts of the internal and the external are intertwined and connected. Living and meditating are but two sides of the same coin. So I want to present a slide to depict this notion. Embracing oneness. Let's start with meditation. Those who have practiced meditation before will readily be able to identify with this image. Meditation is about oneness of the self, mind and spirit. Your mind is what you can focus. Your spirit follows. When I say mind, what I mean is that you assume this meditative pose and you quiet your mind. There are so many stray thoughts buzzing around, so many emotions, which can be positive or negative. So you can see all of those being distracting factors from outside of the true self, outside of the core of your being. When I say the core of your being, I'm talking about something that's beyond the mind, beyond emotions, at the very core, before the superficial layer of feelings and emotions are imposed on top of it. So there are all kinds of things that occur to the mind as you try to quiet them down. Random ideas, distractions that can pull you away from composure. Thinking about the future, maybe thinking about what's to come optimistically. That is, think about your hopes. Or pessimistically, potential dangers, your fears. These all besiege the mind. What can we do about that? Well, Lao Tzu says, hold on to your soul and embrace oneness. use that oneness to bring everything in line. Let the thoughts pass right through. Make no attempt to hold on to them. File away random ideas that occur to you. File away your hopes and fears. You can always come back to them later on. Everything should start to settle. So that is the meditative side of oneness. I mentioned that the other side of the same coin is cultivation in the context of living life. So this is the complementary graphic for that. Whereas the meditation is a passive activity, living one's life, cultivating the Tao in life is dynamic and active. There again, you're going to have all kinds of factors that are trying to besiege your mind and distract you. So the oneness of the self, mind and spirit on the left-hand side, here is oneness of the Tao, which I want to remind everyone means the path or the way. It's all about holding on to the principles and teachings. So the key insight here is that mindfulness is not just for meditation, it's just as important for living everyday life, walking the journey of your life. Just as there are distracting thoughts in your mind, there's definitely no shortage of distractions from the people around you. Sometimes you feel like everyone wants something. Family members, friends, co-workers, and so on. They all make their demands on your time and energy. Sometimes what they want can be contradictory or at odds with one another. Perhaps the boss wants more results from you, but then your significant other wants more attention from you, and you only have a certain amount of time in a day. What to do? Again, Lao Tzu says, hold on to your true self, embrace oneness. Use the oneness of the Tao. Apply the teachings. Use that as a way to keep you centered on the principles that you adhere. For every demand that people make, there is a way to handle it easily and smoothly by using the Tao. For every potential conflict, there is a way to diffuse the situation and work out a compromise and toward harmony. For every obstacle that shows up, every road bump, there is a way to be like water, flow over it, under it, or around it. So that is oneness, applying to the path or the journey of life. Let's continue on to line 2. Line 2 says, can one be steadfast without straying? That is the translation. Let me break down the 4 characters for you one by one. First character is can or able to. Second character is without or not have something. Third character is to depart or leave. And then the last character there, as I mentioned, that is the character that serves as the question mark. It's a punctuation. So what does this mean? You see the character by character transcription as well as the translation. The meaning is, can you embrace oneness and not stray away from it? Can you maintain the mental states of oneness? So in meditation, this is about holding steady in centering yourself. This is the instruction to not waver in your focus, not latch onto distracting thoughts, so that you're able to center yourself without straining your mind, and you can go deeper into the meditative state in a gradual way. In life, it's about character. It's about integrity, holding on to your principles, even when it's not easy, even when compromising your values will bring you material benefits, even when nobody will ever know, and you have a good reason, a good, noble sounding reason as your excuse. So oftentimes, people compromise their values. When doing so, bring them some sort of material benefit. And the temptation is even stronger if they think nobody will ever find out. Or, hey, there's a plausible reason that sounds virtuous for me to do this. Now, this is so important, integrity and character in the Tao, that I want to share a story with everyone to illustrate it. It's one of my favorite stories of all time, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to share with everybody. It is called The Rescuer. Once upon a time, in ancient China, there was a young scholar named Lu. He had done well in the civil service exam, which everybody needed to take in order to work for the imperial government. He became a junior official in his hometown. He worked hard in that position. He gained a modest reputation as a good administrator. One day, Lu received summons from the imperial minister, one of the highest ranking officials in ancient China. Such an order could not be ignored. It was important. So he packed his bags. He made arrangements to cover his absence, and he embarked for the capital. It was a long trip, but Lu made it in time. He arrived on the day specified. He proceeded directly to the government palace, the imperial palace. There, he was face to face with the minister's clerk. He presented the documents he had received. He said, "Good morning, sir. I am here as per His Excellency's orders, as you can see." The clerk looked at the papers and said, "Yes, we are expecting you. Please follow me to the waiting area." "One quick question," Lu said. "It's a great honor for me to go before the minister, but his order did not specify the reason. Can you perhaps shed some light as to why His Excellency will wish to see me?" "Certainly," the clerk said. "You are one of the people recommended for the position of assistant minister, which recently became available." Lu was surprised. Working for such a powerful official, someone who reported directly to the emperor, it made him dizzy to report to a person who reports to the emperor. It seemed like an impossible dream. He stammered, "This is truly an amazing opportunity." "Indeed," the clerk agreed. "You are very fortunate to be summoned. However, there are many candidates like yourself, all competing for the same position. So your chances are probably not that great." "That is as it should be," Lu said in all humility. He said, "It is already an honor to be among the candidates. My colleagues back home will be very envious." He went into the waiting area. He saw many other candidates already present. They were all like him, junior officials. Most of them he recognized by reputation. So Lu compared his own qualifications against theirs. And he quickly realized that he was not the best. Some of them were academic prodigies who had done much better, scored much higher in the civil service exam than he did. So he thought, well, the clerk was probably right. After a while of waiting, it was his turn to see the minister. So the clerk took him to a spacious office where the minister and several officials were hard at work. The minister was presiding over the activities and reading a scroll. He looked up from reading the scroll when the clerk announced Lu. Suddenly, there was an expression of disbelief on the minister. The minister said, "You? Can it be? Is it really you?" He seemed overcome with emotions. Lu was confused by this. The minister came forward to clasp his hand. The minister said, "Do you know the trouble I have gone through looking for you? I have been searching for months." Lu managed to find his voice. Sir, I think you may have mistaken me for someone else." "Nonsense." The minister laughed, and he turned to the others. "Everyone, this is my daughter's rescuer. He saved her from drowning last year." And then he turned to Lu. "Surely you remember, at the lake, during the spring festival, I was so worried about my daughter, I did not even ask for your name. By the time it occurred to me to thank you, you had already departed. I owe you more than I can ever repay." Lu hastily said, "Sir, Your Excellency, please, you owe me absolutely nothing. I have never met you in person until this moment." The minister seemed to take offense at this. "What are you saying? Are you saying my memory is faulty?" He turned to one of the officials next to him. You were there that day, and you also witnessed the rescue. Look carefully at this young man now and tell me, have I made a mistake in recognizing him?" "No, Your Excellency," the official answered. "I also recognized him as soon as he walked in. Your mind and memory are as clear as ever. There can be no doubt. He is the one." So again, Lu responded hastily. I dare not question or contradict your words, sir. Yet I must continue to insist that The minister interrupted him. Cut him off. Please. I know you're being modest. I know you must be a follower of the Tao, and that is why you refuse to take credit for the good you have done. I understand. Let us simply acknowledge the past, and we will say no more about it. Agreed? So many thoughts flashed through Lu's mind in that moment. This was an incredible stroke of luck. Having this advantage of being identified as the rescuer meant he could easily bypass the whole selection process. It didn't matter that the other candidates scored much higher, had better qualifications than him. None of it mattered. All Lu had to do was to agree, nod his head. And the opportunity of being the assistant minister will be as good as his. It would be so easy, but Lu could not bring himself to do it. He took a deep breath, and then he shook his head. I am truly sorry, Your Excellency. This must be a coincidence of astonishing magnitude. I regret. I am not the one who saved your daughter. The only thing I can do is to wish that you find the real rescuer soon. I am truly sorry to disappoint you. The minister seemed deflated. Well, it's hard to believe. I mean, the physical resemblance is absolutely uncanny. I suppose such a coincidence, although unlikely, is always possible. So he paused and then collected his thoughts. Let us bring our discussion back to the matter at hand and talk about your background and qualifications. Much later, when the audience was over, the clerk walked Lu to the front door. His Excellency will contact you, the clerk said, but Lu knew that he would not be coming back. He had thrown away his only chance to win the position over the others. He packed up and traveled back to his hometown. He thought that he would just return to his old routine. But there was another surprise. Another summons came to him from the minister. Like the previous one, it had his name on it. Unlike the previous one, it was addressed not to his current position, but to the assistant minister. It could only mean that the position was his. But how? He was not well qualified, and he was not the rescuer. So Lu looked at the documents. He could hardly believe his eyes. It was a transfer order. He was assigned to join the minister's personal staff, effective immediately. The months that followed passed in a blur. Lu moved to the capital to start his new job. The new environment was exciting and challenging, and it took him a while to get settled in, to feel more comfortable with his expanded powers and duties. One day, he ran into the clerk, the one he first met upon his first visit. They exchanged pleasantries, and then a question occurred to Lu. He asked, did His Excellency ever find the man who saved his daughter? Ah, yes, the clerk said with a lot of amusement. The minister found 8 rescuers on that day that you came in for your interview. This was all the more interesting because His Excellency is so devoted to his work that he has never been married and has no children at all, sons or daughters. The end. So that was the story of the rescuer. Let's talk about the Tao. So you can see that this was actually a test. There never was a rescuer. The whole thing was a fabrication designed to test the candidates. And just like that, we know that in life, we all go through tests. Like the test that Lu went through, many of these tests are not labeled as tests. And like the tests that he went through, some of the tests that we go through are not testing for academic subjects, not testing for knowledge, how much you have memorized, but a test of character. The test is for what kind of person are you? So this kind of test, the test of character, has multiple levels of difficulty, from the easiest to the most difficult. At the most basic level, it's a temptation. It's a situation where there's some sort of advantage that you can gain. It is a compromise of your values, but if you agree to compromise, you can gain something. It is the easiest level, and it is the level at which the majority of humanity will fail, quite possibly including us. We see some kind of advantage. It's not exactly above board, but maybe nobody will find out. The second level is when life ramps up the pressure, like I really could use that extra paycheck or whatever. That is a really good thing that I can gain. I really need it. Or perhaps nobody will ever know. Or perhaps I can present it to the world as being virtuous. I have to do that because. In the story, we saw the pressure being applied in different ways. First, the minister got external verification, or so it would appear. He had another official agree with him. This amps up the pressure. The more pressure there is, it is similar to life. When we see other people do it, and we say to ourselves, well, everybody's doing it. It's not so bad. They get to do it. Why can't I do it? So that's a second level, a higher level of difficulty where many people fail as well, quite possibly including us. And then finally, at the toughest, at the most difficult level of the test is when you are presented with an alibi or a compelling reason, an excuse, a cover. Like when the minister said, oh, I know you're doing it because you are a student of the Tao. You don't want to take credit. That's okay. Let's just you and I agree that it happened, and then we don't need to talk about this ever again. So at the same time that there's a huge advantage winning the position, there is also a plausible, noble-sounding reason to go with the scheme, to go with this fabrication. That is the test at the most difficult level. In my opinion, there are very few people who can pass the test. But that is why the story is being presented. It is a challenge. The challenge to us. And the same question that Lao Tzu is asking when he says, can you hold to the one? Can you hold to the principle of the Tao without straying from it? So that challenge comes in two parts. Number one, do we really understand the Tao that we claim to follow? Do we know the reason why we should have integrity and character? And do we keep ourselves on the path without straying from the path? So these are questions to contemplate. Not necessarily easy, but these are the true tests of life. Those who are curious to find out more, this story comes from my book, The Tao of Success. As I mentioned, It is one of my personal favorites, and there is more about this story from the book, as well as 24 other stories that are similar. Let's continue on to the text of the Tao Te Ching. Line 3. Line 3 says, in concentrating the energy and reaching relaxation. So for this line, I want to single out the second character, qi. So the pinyin is qy. Therefore, I know that sometimes people think it may be qi or qui. No, it's actually qi. And this is just a quirk of the pinyin romanization system. Whenever it is supposed to sound like ch, they use the letter q. So what does it mean when we say qi? Well, here it is the energy that circulates throughout the body. Now, it can also mean breath, breathing. Indeed, since ancient times, there's been a connection that has been noted between breath, breathing, and the energies within the body. Even for us in modern times, we ourselves can feel the change or the flow of energy within the body if we were to engage in a breathing exercise. Now, the connection is not something that only the ancient Chinese had noted. It is something that all human beings have noted. So in the West, we use words like atmosphere and ambience in a very similar way that the different context of qi is used. Let me explain what I mean by that. When we use the word atmosphere, we could mean air, oxygen, the Earth's atmosphere. So in that context, it is exactly mapping to breath or breathing. There has to be an atmosphere on this planet Earth, in order for us to breathe oxygen. But another usage, another context of atmosphere, which you and I have used as well from time to time, is about the feeling of a place. When we say the atmosphere at a particular meeting or an event is so and so, we're not describing the oxygen content in that place at that time. We're talking about how the place feels, the ambience, the energy, quote unquote. In a concert, you might say that the energy, the ambience, the atmosphere is electric, exciting. So when you talk about that, you're no longer talking about breathing air. You're talking about the feeling, the energy that everybody is feeling in that place. Now that's a positive example. There could also be examples where the feeling, the atmosphere, the ambience is more like emotions, emotional, perhaps sadness, and so on. This is just to point out that there has always been this connection between breathing and energy in terms of feelings, emotions, vitality, the feeling of a place. So back to qi, back to this character. When you engage in qi gong, it is the practice of utilizing movements and visualization to cultivate qi energy. There is definitely a lot of breathing associated with the movement. You have to breathe and move in a particular way. Then you can feel the energy coursing through your body. So Qigong is exactly that same character, and you can see it in this slide. Now, I know that when people listen to this talk and get to this point, some of them will be very excited and say, oh, I know, there's also Tai Chi. This is when I have to let everybody know, well, that's a misnomer, that's a misconception. It's actually Tai Chi in the original text, and it gets pronounced Tai Chi because of the older system of romanization. You can see when I have the characters there next to Tai Chi, it is actually the original characters Tai Chi, and neither one of the characters looks anything like this character we're talking about right now, the character for Qi. It's a commonplace misconception only because in Tai Chi, there is also a lot of emphasis on breathing correctly, on energy movements within the body, directing the flow of that energy. So Tai Chi and Qigong oftentimes get confused or mixed up. And indeed, people can be studying both together, using one to complement the other. So now you know the real term, the real original characters for Tai Chi is Tai Chi, and neither one of those characters is Qi, meaning energy. It's just that when you learn Tai Chi, you have to work with your Qi. Hopefully that makes it clear. Let's go to the next key character, Rou. Here's opinion. With opinion, a lot of people will look at that and say, oh, it's Rao. Well, this is one of those sounds that's difficult for a non-native speaker to say correctly. It's Rou. And the meaning is simple. It is soft, the adjective, or softness. Here, specifically, we're talking about the softness of the relaxed body and mind. Like when you relax yourself to go into a meditative state that we started talking about, it could also be the softness that you take with you as you approach different life situations. And there too, you are approaching from a relaxed frame of mind. You're not rigid, you're not dogmatic, you're not harsh or judgmental. So let's take a look at the entire line. When we say concentrating the energy and reaching relaxation, we're talking about this process that you see here, breathing exercise, leading to the ability to concentrate your energy, the energy that's coursing through your body, which leads to overall relaxation of the mind and body. And this is something that we can all feel for ourselves. I state that specifically only because in Western medicine, we know about the circulatory system, nervous system, limb system, immune system, and so on. But there is nothing in Western science that matches the Eastern concept of Qi energy, acupressure points, and the meridians. Meridians are the energy flow pathways in the body. We see nothing when we look into a human body to look for physical signs of these things. But then, at the same time, we all know how it feels when we have the smooth flow of energy within the body. You know it, I know it, you've experienced it, and so have I. So this is one of those things that I personally accept as real, even though there's no recognition of that reality from the Western science and medicine. Moving on to line 4. Line 4 says, can one be like an infant? So again, I want to break down the characters for you. 4 characters. First one, the same. It's the character for can or able to. The middle 2 characters together form the characters for baby or infant. And then the last character there is the question mark. So if you were to go with the transcription and make it verbatim, can baby? Question mark. Well, that's not a real sentence. The meaning is, can you be like a baby? And this is about the softness of the baby. It's an easy way for Laozi to convey what he means by softness. Be as soft as an infant. And this recalls to mind that you and I, we were all infants once upon a time. It is a state that is common to all humanity. It is also a primal state. It is our beginning. So at rest, an infant has no distracting thoughts, no worries, and this is important in consideration to the outer lines in the 6 questions. The relaxed softness is the state, as I mentioned, of primal power. How so? Well, it is the purest state of rest, as well as the most powerful state, like Wu Wei. The baby embodies unlimited potential and possibilities. The potential to become any kind of person, to do anything. So this is like wood. Before a piece of wood, before you work on it, it has the potential to become anything. That's powerful. So the baby is like that, a primal state of the ultimate power. Now, the baby or the infant is actually a concept that is repeated multiple times in the Tao Te Ching. So I want to take a moment to show everyone where those iterations or repetitions are. So this is chapter 10. This is the first iteration of infant. And this chapter talks about being as soft as an infant. If we go forward 10 more chapters, get to chapter 20, we see this. 2 lines from chapter 20. This is Laozi speaking. Laozi says, I alone am quiet and uninvolved, like an infant, not yet smiling. Infant, not yet smiling. What does that mean? This reference is specifically about the state of purity in a Tao cultivator. It is the way that Laozi describes himself to compare and contrast him with most people. Because most people, not knowing, understanding the Tao, have drifted away from their own original nature, their own state of purity. They've been too immersed in the material world. So Laozi says, well, that's what I don't want to be, and that's what I am not. Instead of being immersed and potentially tainted by the material world, Laozi says, I'm not involved with all that. I'm like the original state, like an infant. And then moving forward another 8 chapters, we get to 28. Here, we get another 2 lines about the infant. The eternal virtue does not depart, return to the state of the infant. Here, Laozi is emphasizing the goal, that one of the goals of Tao cultivation is to return to that state. Now, he's specifically not talking about being helpless like an infant, sleeping all the time. He's talking about the mental state prior to the influence of all the toxic elements in this world of ours. Let me give you some examples. Think about the people around you. They have different personalities, different temperaments. So you know that among them, there are some who have become rather cynical. I think you know what I mean. The people who often say, "Oh well," and shrug. The people who often express frustration or resignation. Their thinking is more like, "What's the use?" or "What's the point?" Do you know people like that? I definitely do. More than one person. And if you do know people like that, you also know others who are the complementary opposite. Being cynical and resigned, that's not the only way, of course, to be human and the only way to live. The complementary opposite of that will be the people who always have a sparkle in their eyes. They have a ready smile. They are upbeat, cheerful. They're not cynical. Instead of, "Oh well," they say, "Oh wow," with a sense of wonder and delight. Instead of, "What's the use?" or "What's the point?" they say, "What's it about?" with a sense of curiosity and exploration. That is really what Lao Tzu is trying to say. Return to the state of the infant before the negative, cynical influence of the material world, when you still had a sense of wonder, when you can take delight in the simple little things in life. How great would that be? What a worthwhile goal that can be for all of us. Then we go forward to chapter 55. Here we have two lines that speak to being the infant. Those who hold an abundance of virtue are similar to newborn infants. The first thing that I want you to notice with chapter 55 is that when you look at the characters, they are not the same as 婴儿, which are the two characters used in 28, 20, and also in chapter 10. So even though the characters are different, it is a synonym. The meaning is the same, so the translation is the same. This particular chapter, 55, it goes on further to talk about the state of the infant. And it says specifically, addressing the softness of the infant, it says, "Their bones are weak, tendons are soft, but their grasp is firm." So bones are weak, tendons are soft, directly maps to the softness of the infant that we're talking about in this chapter. And then Lao Tzu says, "Their grasp is firm." That directly maps to what we have here about holding on to embracing oneness without straying. So a lot of times, these connections across chapters are not easy to see, so I am especially glad to point them out for you. In 55, Lao Tzu also says these babies, they can cry the whole day and yet not be hoarse, due to the optimum of harmony. So what is this? What does this map to in our current chapter? All the way from 55 to chapter 10. It maps to the concentration of energy. Think about the concentration of energy when a baby cries. And relaxed softness. The baby is not hoarse due to that relaxed softness leading to the optimum of harmony. So you see, everything makes sense. They make sense together, And once I point out the connections, it seems like the most obvious connection in the world. Let's move on. Line 5. In cleaning away the worldly view. So it'll go on to say, can one be without imperfections? But let's focus on line 5 for now. This line ties back to the previous 2 points. And let me explain what I mean by that. If we start out with the idea or the recognition that the first few lines of this chapter is talking about preparations to enter a meditative state, it actually makes a lot of sense what this line is talking about. To embrace oneness, it means that distractions fade away naturally. That is what happens when you sit down to meditate and you quiet your mind, embrace the oneness within, and you can feel all the distracting influences falling away one by one. Then, manage energy. When you are sensing the flow of energy within you in that meditative state, it is very easy, indeed very natural, to let go of worldly concerns. So basically, when you are going into that state, you're not worried about having to do the laundry, having to pay your taxes or make the mortgage payment. Those are the worldly concerns that you let go of during that time. So simply by holding on to the above, you are able to relax. And this is how this line can be easily seen as connecting with the previous lines. It is basically talking about how you can hold on to all of the above to find your center, not drift away. And another way to say that is to stay on the path and not get away from the path, to be able to relax, to have that mental and physical softness like a baby. So what can we learn from all this? Well, we can see now that the first 6 lines, including this line and the next line, they all have a unifying thread, and it's directed at the spiritual self. That is why I say these are inwardly directed. These are all about the inward directed practice. Let's go to line 6. Can one be without imperfections? So let me break down the characters there. So the first character again means can. The second character means not have or without. Then we have a character for flaws, and then we have the question mark. So the meaning is, can you be flawless in following these steps? What steps? The steps that Lao Tzu has talked about, where you are concentrating your energy, reaching relaxation, becoming soft and relaxed. And this line is also connected to the previous lines. The oneness that you embrace is your true self reflecting the Tao. And this is important. Let me reiterate. To embrace the soul is to be one with your true self or original nature. And the recognition here for all of us is that the original nature that we all possess started out as the perfect blank slate before becoming tainted by the material world. And the other connection, this is your original nature, the blank slate of flawlessness, as I said. And the infant. The infant represents this flawless state. The infant is the simplest and most direct imagery to serve as a reminder of this perfection. After all, we all began our lives in that state as an infant. You started that way, I started that way, so did everyone else. Okay, we are now getting close to the top of the hour. It's a good thing, it's a very good thing that we have completed the line-by-line discussion of the first 6 lines, which form the first 3 questions. So as you saw in the sectional analysis that we did at the beginning, this is the completion of the first subsection. So this is actually a good place, a logical place for us to come to a stop for today. Let me get us to the summary where we will encounter those same concepts as a reminder for everybody. So let's summarize what we have talked about. Today in chapter 10, it is all about turning your focus inward. So the 3 parts that we have discussed. Number 1, hold the soul, embrace the oneness. As you heard, the oneness, the unity, is synonymous with the Tao. So to embrace oneness is to embrace the Tao, which also implies the principles of the Tao, staying on the path. And we want to be consistent in doing so, and that's the part that says, hey, don't stray away. This is what leads to harmony, the consistency of the practice. Number 2, concentrate your energy and relax. This is all about the flow of the internal energy, the breath, controlling the breath, utilizing, leveraging the breath to help you to become as soft and supple, as relaxed as an infant. And as we will see next time, this has implications not just in meditation, but also Tao cultivation, as well as living one's life. But moving on for now, number 3 is cleanse the worldly view. This means turning away from the colorful distractions of the material world. This is what will take us back to the purity of our original nature. So there's a lot more to talk about. In the 6 questions, we have completed the 3 that are inwardly directed. We still must talk about the other 3 questions to form the whole set. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.